Hello, welcome back. This is lesson 1. I hope you have all read all the documents and everything that was in the general introduction for the class, and you are ready to start with our first lesson. And this lesson, as you see on the screen, is the scientific revolution. So we start this semester and we are going to talk a little about just one aspect of the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution includes all fields of science. There were new discoveries in chemistry, medicine, physics, but we are going to concentrate on the aspect, the area of the revolution that changed drastically the way people looked at the world and the way people looked at themselves. And this is the area of astronomy. So what we are going to concentrate on is, first, we are going to analyze how the view that people had in the Middle Ages about the world changed. And then we are going to analyze something that is totally revolutionary, which is the new scientific method. So we are going to have, so the lesson is going to concentrate on two different parts. One is the world view, how it changed, and then the scientific method. So in order to analyze and understand how the world view changed in the late 15th century and early 16th century, we need to analyze first how it was before it changed. How did people see the world, the universe? Now, it is not true that they thought that the earth was flat. This may have been popular beliefs by peasants, but educated people were perfectly aware that the earth was round, and they believed that the earth was the center of the universe. So, and this view is called the geocentric view of the universe. The one who designed what is called the geocentric view is Ptolemy, who is an astronomer who lived about 600 years after Aristotle. So between the ideas of Aristotle and the ideas of Ptolemy, and Ptolemy lived in about the 2nd century AD, Aristotle lived around the 4th century BC. So there were 600 years between Aristotle, who lived in Greece, in Athens, in the Hellenic period, and Ptolemy, who lived in what is called the Hellenistic period. For those of you who did not take Western Civilization 1 yet, the Greek history, the ancient Greek history, is divided into Hellenic period and the Hellenistic period. And Aristotle lived in the Hellenic period in the first part, and Ptolemy lived in the Hellenistic period. So this geocentric view was the view that the Greeks had, and that view continued after the fall of the Roman Empire during the period that is called the Middle Ages. And during the Middle Ages, Western civilization had become Christian, and the Christian scholars accepted the view of Ptolemy. So the geocentric view of the universe continued to be the view of the intellectual people of the Middle Ages. Except the Greeks were not Christian. They did not believe in one creator, God, and they did not have any idea of an afterlife reward or punishment. And so for Christians in the Middle Ages it was very important to imagine where heaven was and where hell was. So to the geocentric view of Ptolemy, Christian scholars added a view of heaven and hell. So here is then the way the geocentric view looked like. Most of the lesson we are going to spend looking at how within almost 200 years, beginning with Copernicus and ended with Sir Isaac Newton, this view, what you have in front of you right now, this view was slowly, stage by stage, eliminated, and by the time of Newton it had changed drastically. Now everything that you can read here is in Latin, and remember that Latin was the language of the educated people in the Middle Ages. No matter where you lived, if you were educated, you spoke Latin. Latin was the language of the universities, Latin was the language of the schools, and Latin was the way all the educated people communicated with. So, and that's the reason why you see here the names of the planets in Latin, and everything here is also in Latin. So how is this world that the medieval people thought we were living in? First of all, here is Earth. This is Earth, and at the center of Earth we have hell. They had a place where hell was, and that was in the center of the Earth. So we have then one of the additions that Christianity gave to the geocentric view. Then we have the Earth is at the center of the universe, and then around the Earth revolve the planets, including the moon. You see here the word luna, which is Latin for moon, and including the sun, which is here. The moon, the planets that we know of, and the sun, all of them were revolving around the Earth according to their view. Now, why did the planets stay in orbit? That was a very good question. And the answer that they gave was the only reason why the planets stay going round and round and round around the Earth is because they are attached to a sphere that moves around the Earth. But they were smart, they were intelligent, so they would ask, but why is it that we see the planets and we don't see the spheres? Well, the answer, they had to have an answer. So their answer was, because we do not see the spheres, because the spheres are transparent. But if they are transparent, what are they made out of? Well, crystal is transparent. So those spheres that hold the planets are made out of crystal. So they are crystalline, transparent spheres. And that's how the planets stay around. But there was another problem. The Earth didn't move. The Earth stayed in the center without moving, and the planets did move. So what is the explanation of the planet not moving versus the other celestial bodies moving? Again, they had an answer for that. And the answer is, the earth is really heavy. However, from the moon up, so every celestial body, all the celestial bodies are made out of a substance that is very light, and they called it ether. E-T-H-E-R, ether. Everything, all the planets, the moon, the sun, all those planets are ethereal. They are very light, and that's why they can move. We have then the explanation of the earth not moving, the planets moving around the earth and attached to their crystalline spheres, and also of a different substance from the earth. But then, beyond the last of the planets, Saturn, there is another sphere, and it's this one. And this is a very important sphere because it has attached all the stars. And that was the last of the spheres of the universe. So that was the end of the universe. This is the geocentric universe. But then came the Christian question: where is heaven? Very good answer. Don't you remember that according to Scripture, Jesus ascended to heaven? Jesus went up to heaven. So heaven needs to be beyond the fixed stars. So, and where is God? Where does Jesus live? Where does God live? Beyond the fixed stars. So people go when they die and they are good, they go up to heaven. And if you notice here, this is one heaven, this one is another level of heaven, and this one is, and if you can read the words, it says this is the place where God lives. And with this, the universe is complete. Now, notice that this is not an infinite universe, because the last of the spheres has the stars, and beyond has heaven. And with this, we complete the view of the universe. So this is the medieval view of the universe. The only thing left is to see how during this scientific revolution, this perfect view of the universe that all intellectuals, all scholars, and all Christian leaders accepted, was very slowly destroyed. And the person who started this revolution is Copernicus. And so partly because it really was a drastic change, not only in the physics of the universe, but in the psychological and intellectual and emotional view of the universe. Because remember, the reason why the earth was at the center of the universe was because the earth is where God created humans, and is where God sent his son. That's where Jesus lived. That's the place where Jesus died. There is no other place that can be the center of the universe. And then suddenly there is this guy called Copernicus who comes with a new view. And of course, many people said he was crazy, they were angry at him, and Copernicus knew that this was going to be such a revolution that he was afraid of publishing his book. But in the big picture, if we look at it carefully, we can see that Copernicus didn't change that much. Yes, Copernicus changed the position of Earth and the position of the Sun. So here is the new heliocentric view of the universe. So heliocentric means the Sun is the center of the universe. Earth is just one of the planets that go around the Sun. We have the Sun, and then we have all the planets that go around the Sun, including Earth. Copernicus didn't deal with many of the other features of the medieval view. For instance, he never thought that the orbits of the planets were not circular. He never questioned that the fixed stars were beyond the last of the planets. He never questioned the substance of the Earth versus the substance of the planets. And certainly he never questioned or mentioned the position of heaven or hell. And this is just the beginning. And then after Copernicus, there were hundreds of scientists studying the universe. There are a few that are the most important ones, and those are because each of them changed something from the old view. So we have people like, after Copernicus, we have Tycho, we have Kepler, we have Galileo, and certainly we have then Sir Isaac Newton. And with Newton, we could say that the entire geocentric view was destroyed. So your job in this lesson is to find what each of them did to destroy the view. After Newton, that was almost 200 years after Copernicus, this is the new solar system. Because of the discoveries of all these, now we have the orbits are no longer circular, they are elliptical. The Sun is on one side, is in one of the focus of the elliptical orbit, and also they had no longer the idea that the substance of the Earth was different from the substance of the planets. Galileo had taken care of that. Also, if you notice, there are no fixed stars here. They understood now that the stars were celestial bodies that were there. They didn't know much about them, but they knew they existed, but they were not attached to any sphere. The idea of the crystalline spheres disappeared also, and also notice that there is no place for heaven or hell. How is the new worldview? Well, it's heliocentric, the orbits are elliptical, there are no more fixed stars, there is the same substance in the entire universe, and with, of course, with Newton, the universal gravitation explained why the planets stayed around the Sun. So no more crystalline spheres. And the universe is no longer limited by the stars and heaven. It has become an infinite universe. And so this is the new worldview. And of course, the position of humans in that universe automatically changed, because humans no longer live in the center, at the center of the universe. This was psychologically very difficult. The most difficult thing was they had relied so much on the idea that parts of the Bible, especially the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, supported the geocentric view, that it was really difficult for many people to accept that. And as time went on, by the time of Galileo, there were many people who were saying, well, if this new view is true, that means the Bible is not true. And so there was a great deal of uneasiness and questioning. And so it was during the time of Galileo that the Catholic Church wanted to stop that. For about 100 years, the Catholic Church had not opposed the ideas of Copernicus. But it was so much questioning that the Church had told Galileo, stop saying that. Let's wait until we find more proof. And Galileo was convinced that this view was the correct view, and that the earth did move around the sun. So Galileo got in trouble, as you remember. The Inquisition condemned him. And so I would like to bring you back to Galileo, because we know that he is famous because he's the first one who saw with his telescope the moon. And he looked at the moon and he realized that the moon had craters and had cavities, and that proved that the moon was not ethereal. So that was a way to destroy this idea that anything that was not earth was spiritual, ethereal. But something I want you to focus on is the letter that Galileo sent to his friend, the letter to the Duchess Christina. I want you to read it because it's very interesting. When you read it, you realize that Galileo could have written that letter 10 years ago or 50 years ago. It's so much like, imagine that Galileo is writing that letter because of the controversy about Darwin's evolutionary theory. I am going to ask you specifically to read this letter, and I wanted to mention this to you before we go into the next and last part of the lesson, and that is the beginning of the scientific method. Please read in the book about Descartes, the father of rationalism, and read about Sir Francis Bacon, but he proposed something that became known as the scientific method, and it is the reliance on empirical information. If you want to analyze or to come up with some scientific view, you need to do an experiment. You need to use a method that is called inductive method, which goes from experimentation, first observation, experimentation, and then you create a theory. I would like to ask you to look carefully at Descartes' ideas, look carefully at Sir Francis Bacon's ideas, and then compare the medieval method with the modern scientific method. The medieval method. Some people say, oh, in the Middle Ages they did not think, and that is of course a lie. People used rational thinking in the Middle Ages, but they were intellectuals and they used deductive method. The deductive method is the method used in mathematics. You do not need, for a mathematical deduction, for mathematical knowledge, you do not need experiments. You only need to use the deductive method. And this is the medieval method. This is the method that they used in the Middle Ages. The medieval method, therefore, was theoretical. So everything is intellectual. There is no empirical information. And this may be the most important difference between the medieval method and the modern method. In the Middle Ages, even the most intelligent, outstanding, rational people relied on authorities. Anything that we build upon has to be based on authority. If Aristotle said it, it has to be true. If Ptolemy said it, it has to be true. Once you accept the authority, then you can build up and use deductive method and come up with new statements that you can prove, but you first have to accept the authorities. There is no scientific theory in the method that they used in the Middle Ages. Now, compared to that, how does the modern method work? Well, first, we have the two methods of learning. We have the inductive and we have the deductive. So that means we go from observation, experimentation, we create theories. And then the theories, we have the theories, and then we can make more experiments that would prove the theories. And if the experiments do not prove the theory, then we change the theory. But we have to work with both. And then once we have a theory, we can use the deductive method to create more theories. But we have to have both inductive and deductive. If you are a scientist, we do not rely on authorities. In fact, maybe the challenge of every scientist today is to prove that another scientist is wrong. And if you prove that an authority is wrong, then you are the most famous scientist. And the best example is Einstein. Why is Einstein so famous? Because he proved Newton wrong. And that's what any scientist that you know today is trying to do that. He's trying to prove his theory and prove somebody else's theory wrong. With this, we have then that modern science is based on theories. And as long as a theory is not proven wrong, as long as you don't have evidence that the theory is wrong, the theory continues to be valid. The moment that with experimentation you prove that a theory is no longer valid, then you change the theory. And that's what modern science is, and that is because of the scientific revolution. And with this, we finish this lesson. So now your job is to fill in the blanks. I have given you the big picture, and now I'm going to ask you to go into the details of everything that we have mentioned today.